Have you ever watched someone humiliate another person in public and then just stood there, doing nothing? I have. And I want to tell you about the day a hotel manager in Vancouver learned, the hard way, that you never truly know who you're looking at. The lobby of the Harwick Grand Hotel on Georgia Street smelled like cedar and expensive soap. It always did. The kind of smell that was engineered to make guests feel they had arrived somewhere that mattered. Marble floors so polished you could see your own reflection coming up to meet you. A front desk staffed by people trained to smile in a very specific way, warm enough to seem genuine, controlled enough to signal that not everyone was welcome to the same degree. It was a Tuesday morning in early November, the kind of cold that comes off Burrard Inlet and gets into your coat whether you like it or not. The lobby was moving at its usual pace, rolling luggage, hushed phone calls, a concierge pointing a couple toward the elevator bank. That was when the doors opened. Theo Grantham walked in. Theo Grantham, 29 years old, the kind of man who looked younger than he was, slight frame, brown skin, close-cropped hair, wearing a dark green parka that had seen better years, jeans and boots, with a small scuff on the left toe that he'd never gotten around to buffing out. He carried a single worn canvas bag over one shoulder. No rolling luggage, no business suit. He walked slowly, deliberately, the way a person walks when they're not in a hurry and they know it. He crossed the lobby toward the front desk. He didn't get there. "Excuse me." The voice came from the left, sharp, clipped. The voice of a man who had spent years practicing the exact tone that stops people mid-step. Brendan Forde was 38 years old, the Harwick Grand's general manager. A title he wore the way some men wear expensive watches, as both tool and declaration. He was tall, sandy-haired, with the posture of someone who had once been told he looked authoritative and had never let go of it. He wore a charcoal suit, a hotel pin on his lapel, and an expression that had already made up its mind. He looked at Theo Grantham the way a person looks at something they're trying to figure out how to remove. "Can I help you?" he said. The words were polite. The tone was not. Theo stopped. He looked at Brendan. "I'm fine, thanks. Are you a guest here? I have a meeting." Brendan's jaw shifted slightly. "A meeting? With whom? That's between me and them." A beat of silence. A few guests nearby glanced over. The woman at the front desk, her name tag, read Claire, had gone very still, watching. "Sir," Brendan said, stepping closer, lowering his voice to something that was supposed to sound reasonable but didn't. "Our guests have expectations. If you're not a registered guest or a confirmed visitor, I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside while I verify." Theo looked at him for a long moment, said nothing. His expression didn't change. He had the kind of stillness that unsettles people who are used to getting a reaction. "I'll wait," Theo said. "Right here." He moved to one of the chairs near the window, a low, cream-colored armchair with a small table beside it, and sat down. He put his bag on the floor. He looked out at the street. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Brendan Forde did not go back to his office. He stood in the middle of his lobby, hands clasped behind his back, watching Theo Grantham the way a security camera watches a door. 1 minute passed, then 2. He walked over. "I'm going to need to see some ID." Theo looked up at him. "You're not a police officer. I'm the general manager of this hotel, and you're asking me for ID because I'm sitting in a chair." Brendan's neck reddened. "I'm asking because we've had issues with what?" The question landed flat and clean. Brendan didn't finish the sentence because there was no version of it he could say out loud. Theo reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a card, plain, matte black, no logo, and held it between 2 fingers. Brendan looked at it, his brow furrowed. He took it. The card read, "Theo Grantham, Director of Acquisitions, Halcyon Capital Group." Brendan turned it over, blank on the back. "This doesn't tell me what you're doing in my lobby." "Your lobby," Theo repeated, quietly. "The hotel's lobby. I'm responsible for—" "What time do you think it is?" Theo asked. Brendan blinked. "It's 9:15. And what time do meetings generally start?" "Mister, my meeting is at 9:30. Theo took the card back. "I'm 15 minutes early. I'm sitting in a chair. I haven't done anything. Claire at the front desk was now very deliberately not looking at them. A bellman near the elevator had turned slightly away. Two guests in the seating area across the lobby had stopped their conversation. Nobody said anything. Nobody moved. Brendan Forde went back to the front desk. He leaned over the counter and spoke quietly to Claire. "Who's he meeting with?" I'm not sure, Mr. Forde. I don't have a guest by that name flagged on the system. Did anyone call down for a visitor pass? Not that I've seen." Brendan straightened. He turned and looked at Theo again. Something had settled in him that was worse than suspicion. It was certainty. The kind of certainty that comes not from evidence, but from a decision already made. He walked back across the lobby. "I've just spoken to the desk," he said. "There's no record of your meeting in our system. No one has requested your access. Meetings don't always go through the front desk at this hotel. They do. That's protocol." "Whose protocol?" "Mine." Theo looked at him. "Okay. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I'm not going to do that." Brendan's voice dropped. "I'm asking you very clearly, and I'm telling you very clearly that I have a meeting here at 9:30 and I'm going to attend it." Theo's voice was calm. Even. The way deep water is calm. "You can escort me out if you'd like. I'd recommend thinking carefully about that." Brendan Forde was not a man who thought carefully when he was angry. That had always been his problem, though no one beneath him had ever been in a position to say so out loud. He reached over and took Theo's canvas bag off the floor. "What are you doing?" Claire said from behind the desk. It came out before she could stop it. Brendan ignored her. He held the bag out toward Theo. "You can take this with you when you leave." Theo stood up, slowly. He was several inches shorter than Brendan, which did not seem to register with Brendan as any kind of useful information. He took the bag from Brendan's hand. "Thank you," he said. Brendan blinked. He'd expected something else. "I'd like your name," Theo said. "Full name. I'm the general manager. Full name." A pause. "Brendan Forde." Theo nodded once. He reached into the bag. He pulled out a phone, glanced at the screen, then looked back up at Brendan Forde. "My 9:30 is here," he said. The elevator opened. 3 people stepped out. A woman in her 50s, silver-haired, in a dark blazer. This was Helen Marsh, senior partner at Alderton and Marsh, the legal firm that had been handling the acquisition paperwork for the past 4 months. Beside her, a younger man carrying a leather folio, and beside him, someone Brendan Forde knew, Warren Clifton, 54, the Harwick Grand's regional director, Brendan's boss's boss, based in Toronto. Only ever in Vancouver for significant events. He was not supposed to be here today. He crossed the lobby quickly. He was looking at Theo. "Mr. Grantham." He extended his hand. "I'm sorry, we were running a few minutes behind upstairs. I hope you weren't waiting long." "Not long," Theo said. He shook the hand. Warren Clifton turned. He saw Brendan Forde standing 2 feet away with the expression of a man who has just understood, with total clarity, that he has made a catastrophic error. "Brendan." Warren's voice was even. Professionally even. The kind of even that costs something to maintain. "Mr. Clifton," Brendan said. "I wasn't. I didn't know you were. Were you speaking with Mr. Grantham just now?" A pause that stretched too long. "Yes. About what?" Silence. Helen Marsh looked at Brendan Forde with the quiet, measuring attention of someone who has spent 30 years in courtrooms. "Why don't we go up?" Theo said. He looked at Warren. "I'd like to get started." They moved toward the elevator. Claire watched from behind the desk. The bellman watched. The 2 guests who had never resumed their conversation watched. Brendan Forde stood alone in the middle of the lobby, holding nothing. What Brendan Forde did not know, what almost no one at the Harwick Grand knew, was that for the past 6 months, the hotel's parent company, Alderton Holdings, had been in quiet negotiations with Halcyon Capital Group regarding the full acquisition of 3 of its Canadian properties, including the Harwick Grand on Georgia Street. Theo Grantham had been the lead on the deal from the beginning. He was not just an employee of Halcyon. He was the 3rd largest individual stakeholder in the firm. He had built his position over 7 years, starting as a junior analyst out of UBC, surviving 2 market corrections and 1 company restructure, and making a series of investments in the mid-2010s that most people in his office thought were reckless at the time, and that turned out to be, in retrospect, the kind of decisions that only look obvious after they've worked. He didn't talk about money because he'd grown up watching people who talked about money lose it. He dressed the way he dressed because he'd never seen the point of wearing something different to an airport than he would to a Saturday morning. He had been told, at various points in his career, that he should think about how he presented himself. He had nodded politely each time and continued doing exactly as he pleased. The meeting on the 14th floor lasted 3 hours and 40 minutes. Helen Marsh spread the final documents across the conference table. Signatures were reviewed. Terms that had been negotiated for months were confirmed. Warren Clifton spoke briefly about the transition plan. Theo asked 3 questions, each of them precise, each of them about something no one else in the room had flagged. At 12:55, the acquisition was complete. The Harwick Grand Hotel, as of that afternoon, was part of the Halcyon portfolio. Theo Grantham was, in practical terms, the most powerful person connected to the property. He packed his canvas bag. He rode the elevator back down. Brendan Forde was in his office when his desk phone rang. It was Warren Clifton's assistant asking him to come upstairs. He straightened his jacket. He told himself it was probably nothing. He was good at telling himself things. He was not good at believing them. Warren Clifton was standing at the window of the 14th floor boardroom when Brendan walked in. Helen Marsh had gone. So had the younger associate. The room was quiet, with the particular quality of quiet that follows a decision. Warren turned. "Sit down, Brendan." Brendan sat. "I'm going to ask you something, and I'd like you to answer me honestly, because I think honesty at this point is the only thing that might do you any good." Warren pulled out the chair across from him and sat. "What did you say to Theo Grantham this morning?" Brendan's hands were flat on the table. "I was doing my job. There was an individual in the lobby who didn't appear to have a reason to be there. No one had flagged a visitor. I followed protocol. You took his bag." Silence. "Claire told me," Warren said, "and there are 2 guests who were in the lobby who have already sent complaint emails to our guest relations line. In the past 2 hours, Brendan said nothing. Brendan, you've been with this company for 11 years. You've managed this property for 4 of them. I need you to understand what I'm about to say." Warren folded his hands. "Theo Grantham is not a guest. He's not a vendor. He's not a corporate client. As of this afternoon, he is part of the ownership structure of this property. And you walked up to him in his own lobby, questioned his right to be there, and took his bag. I didn't know. That's not actually the defense you think it is." The room held that for a moment. "His bag," Warren repeated. "You took his bag." Brendan opened his mouth, closed it. "I'm placing you on administrative leave effective immediately," Warren said. "HR will be in contact by end of day. There will be a formal review process. I'd strongly encourage you to cooperate fully with it." He stood. "You can leave your hotel key and your access card with Claire on your way out." Brendan Forde sat in the chair for a moment after Warren left. The room was very quiet. Through the window, he could see the inlet, the mountains beyond it, the gray November sky pressing down on all of it. He had managed this hotel for 4 years. He had never, not once, considered that he might be wrong about someone. He was escorted from the building at 3:15. Claire watched him go. So did the bellman. So did 2 members of the housekeeping staff, who happened to be near the service corridor. Nobody said anything. Nobody needed to. The lobby was quiet after he left. The cedar and soap smell was still there. Theo Grantham ate lunch at a counter-service ramen place on Robson, 3 blocks from the hotel. He sat at a corner stool and ate slowly and read something on his phone. The restaurant was warm and a little loud and smelled like broth and sesame. He paid at the counter, tipped generously, zipped up his scuffed green parka, and walked back out into the November cold. He did not stop to savor anything. He was not that kind of person. He had 3 more calls scheduled for the afternoon, and a flight back to Toronto the next morning, and a presentation to prepare for Thursday that had nothing to do with the Harwick Grand or Brendan Forde or anything that had happened in that lobby. But here is the thing about that morning, the thing I keep coming back to. At no point, not when Brendan stopped him at the door, not when he demanded ID, not when he took the bag, did Theo raise his voice. He didn't make a scene, he didn't threaten, he didn't pull out his phone to film it, though he would have been completely within his rights to do so. He just answered the questions put to him. He stated what was true. He sat back down. He had learned, he said later in an interview, one of the few he'd ever given, that the most powerful thing you can do when someone underestimates you is to let them keep doing it, right up until the moment it's too late for them to correct course. People like that, he said, are depending on you to get upset. The upset is what gives them the story they've already written. The moment you stay calm, you've taken the pen out of their hand. He wasn't performing calm. That's the part that's hardest to explain to people who've never experienced something like that. He had simply been through this before. Not that lobby, not those exact words, but the shape of it, the narrowing eyes, the voice that drops to pretend at reasonableness. The demand for something that is never really about safety or protocol and always about something else, something that doesn't get named because the person doing it knows, on some level, that naming it would be the end of their argument. He had stopped being surprised by it a long time ago. That didn't mean it didn't cost him something. Claire Hendricks, that was her full name, Claire Hendricks, 26, front desk coordinator, 3 years with the hotel, wrote a statement for the HR review that took her 2 evenings to get right. She wrote it and rewrote it until it was accurate and complete and said exactly what she had seen without embellishment and without evasion. She had watched the whole thing from behind the desk. She had not said anything. She had said something once. "What are you doing?" When Brendan took the bag, but then gone quiet when he ignored her. She had gone quiet because he was her manager, and she had been working there for 3 years, and she had a student loan that wasn't finished, and she knew what often happens to people who speak up in those situations. She wrote all of this in the statement, including the part about why she'd gone quiet. She wasn't sure if that was brave or not. She thought probably it wasn't. She thought probably it was just the least she could do at a point when it finally cost her nothing. She thought about Theo Grantham sitting in that chair, the stillness of him. She thought about the 2 guests who had emailed a complaint within 2 hours without anyone asking them to. She thought about how easy it would have been, for any of them, to simply say something. In the moment, when it would have actually mattered. She went back to work. She did her job. She answered guests' questions and called up to rooms and smiled in the way she had been trained to smile. And she decided that if she ever saw something like that again, if anyone ever stood that still in that lobby while someone tried to make them feel like they had no right to be there, she would say something, out loud, in the moment, whatever it cost her. The Harwick Grand underwent its transition quietly over the following months. There were staffing changes, some expected, some not. The restaurant on the mezzanine level was renovated. A new general manager was brought in from Calgary, a woman named, but that's another story. Brendan Forde's formal review concluded that he had engaged in conduct unbecoming the hotel's values and code of professional standards. His employment was terminated. He contested it. Initially, the way people contest things they know they've lost. Then he didn't. He found another position, eventually. In property management, smaller scale. He did not, as far as anyone knew, change in any particular way. That's usually how it goes. People who are made to face consequences often just take what they've learned and carry it into the next room, where no one knows what happened in the last one. Maybe that's too cynical. Maybe he thought about it. Maybe on a Tuesday morning, seeing someone walk through a glass door in a worn-out jacket, he remembered. Maybe not. I want to be honest with you about something. When I tell you stories like this one, I don't want you walking away feeling good because the bad guy got fired. I mean, fair enough, he should have been. But that's not really the point. The point is Claire Hendricks, standing behind that desk, watching it happen, and saying nothing until it was too late for it to matter. The point is the two guests who emailed immediately after, who had the words in them all along and held on to them until the moment they could let them go from a safe distance. The point is every person in that lobby who watched a man get stopped, questioned, and have his bag taken for the crime of sitting a chair and decided that this was not their problem. Most of us, if we're being honest, have been in that lobby. Most of us have watched something unfold, at work, at a store, on a street, and made a very quick calculation about what it would cost us to say something, and decided the cost was too high, and kept moving. I'm not judging that. I understand that calculation. I've made it myself. But I think about Theo Grantham sitting in that chair, as still as standing water, and I wonder what it would have meant if even one had just said, "This is not okay." Not a speech, not a confrontation, just a sentence. "This is not okay." That's the story I keep turning over, not the karma, not the twist, not the satisfying moment when Warren Clifton stepped off that elevator and Brendan Forde finally understood what he'd done. The moment I keep coming back to is a woman at a front desk who watched the whole thing and then spent 2 evenings writing a statement that told the truth because she had finally run out of reasons not to. I think there's something important in that, about who we are when it costs us something, about what we're willing to say when the person being looked at isn't us. If this story made you think, if it made you uncomfortable, or angry, or if you recognize something in it, leave a comment below. Tell me when you've been in that lobby. Tell me whether you said something. Tell me what you wish you'd done differently, or what you're glad you did. And if you want more stories like this, stories about people who are underestimated, about the slow machinery of what's right eventually grinding into place, subscribe to Hollow Stories. We're here every week. Like this video if it meant something to you. Share it if you think someone else needs to hear it. Because some stories don't fix anything, but some stories remind you that you still can.